This Israeli government has killed more children, more journalists, more aid workers, and more medical personnel.
As we look ahead, we must also address the rise of violence against innocent Palestinians on the West Bank and set the conditions for a better future, including a two-state solution.
Is that some nations are above international law.
To stand up against aggression. When Russia invaded Ukraine, we could have stood by and merely protested. But Vice President Harris and I understood that that was an assault on everything this institution was supposed to stand for. And so, in my direction, America stepped into the breach, providing massive security and economic and humanitarian assistance. Our NATO allies and partners in 50-plus nations stood up as well. But most importantly, the Ukrainian people stood up. I asked the people of this chamber to stand up for them. The good news is Putin's war has failed and at his core aim. He set out to destroy Ukraine, but Ukraine is still free. He set out to weaken NATO, but NATO is bigger, stronger, and more united than ever before, with 2 new members, Finland and Sweden. But we cannot let up. The world now has another choice to make. Will we sustain our support to help Ukraine win this war and preserve its freedom, or walk away and let aggression be renewed and a nation be destroyed? I know my answer. We cannot grow weary. We cannot look away. And we will not let up on our support for Ukraine, not until Ukraine wins a just and durable peace in the UN Charter. We also need to uphold our principles as we seek to responsibly manage the competition with China so it does not veer into conflict. We stand ready to cooperate on urgent challenges for the good of our people and the people everywhere. We recently resumed cooperation with China to stop the flow of deadly synthetic narcotics. I appreciate the collaboration. It matters for the people of my country and many others around the world. On matters of conviction, the United States is unabashed, pushing back against unfair economic competition, against military coercion of other nations in the South China Sea, and maintaining peace and stability across the Taiwan Straits, and protecting our most advanced technologies so they cannot be used against us or any of our partners. At the same time, we're going to continue to strengthen our network of alliances and partnerships across the Indo-Pacific. These partnerships are not against any nation. They're building blocks for a free, open, secure, and peaceful Indo-Pacific. We're also working to bring greater measure of peace and stability to the Middle East. The world must not flinch from the horrors of October 7th. Any country would have the right and responsibility to ensure that such an attack can never happen again. Thousands of armed Hamas terrorists invaded a sovereign state, slaughtering and massacring more than 1,200 people, including 46 Americans, in their homes and at a music festival. Despicable acts of sexual violence, 250 innocents taken hostage. I've met with the families of those hostages. I've grieved with them. They're going through hell. Innocent civilians in Gaza are also going through hell. Thousands and thousands killed, including aid workers. Too many families dislocated, crowding into tents, facing a dire humanitarian situation. They did not ask for this war that Hamas started. I put forward with Qatar and Egypt a ceasefire and hostage deal. It's been endorsed by the UN Security Council. Now is the time for the parties to finalize its terms, bring the hostages home, and secure security for Israel and Gaza free of Hamas' grip, ease the suffering in Gaza, and end this war. On October 7th, since October 7th, we've also been determined to prevent a wider war that engulfs the entire region. Hezbollah, unprovoked, joined the October 7th attack, launching rockets into Israel. Almost a year later, too many on each side of the Israeli-Lebanon border remain displaced. A full-scale war is not in anyone's interest. Even if the situation has escalated, a diplomatic solution is still possible. In fact, it remains the only path to lasting security to allow the residents from both countries to return to their homes and the border safely. And that's what we're working tirelessly to achieve. As we look ahead, we must also address the rise of violence against innocent Palestinians on the West Bank and set the conditions for a better future, including a two-state solution where the world, where Israel enjoys security and peace and full recognition and normalized relations with all its neighbors, where Palestinians live in security, dignity, and self-determination in a state of their own. Progress toward peace will put us in a stronger position to deal with the ongoing threat posed by Iran. Together we must deny oxygen to its terrorist proxies, which have called for more October 7th and ensure that Iran will never, ever obtain a nuclear weapon.
The UN is under attack, literally and figuratively. For nearly a year, the sky blue flag flying over UN shelters and schools in Gaza has been powerless to protect innocent civilians from Israeli military bombardment. UN aid trucks sit motionless just miles away from starving Palestinians. Humanitarian workers who proudly wear the emblem of this institution are disparaged and targeted. And the rulings of the UN's International Court of Justice are defied, its opinions disregarded. So it's no surprise that both inside and outside this hall, trust in UN's cornerstone principles and ideals is crumbling. The harsh reality many see is that some nations are above international law, that global justice does bend to the will of power, and that human rights are selective, a privilege to be granted or denied at will. We cannot stand for that. And we must recognize that undermining our international institutions and global frameworks is one of the gravest threats to our global security today. Ask yourselves, if we are not nations united in the conviction that all people are equal in rights, dignity, and worth, and that all countries are equal in the eyes of the law, what kind of world does that leave us with? Your Excellencies, the attacks of October 7th on Israeli civilians last year were condemned by countries all over the world, including Jordan. But the unprecedented scale of terror unleashed on Gaza since that day is beyond any justification. The Israeli government's assault has resulted in one of the fastest death rates in recent conflicts, one of the fastest rates of starvation caused by war, the largest cohort of child amputees, and unprecedented levels of destruction. This Israeli government has killed more children, more journalists, more aid workers, and more medical personnel than any other war in recent memory. And let us not forget the attacks on the West Bank. There, since October 7th, the Israeli government has killed more than 700 Palestinians, among them 160 children. Palestinians held in Israeli detention centers exceed 10,700, including 400 women and 730 children. 730 children. Over 4,000 Palestinians have been forced from their homes and lands. Armed settler violence has surged, and entire villages have been displaced. And in Jerusalem, a flagrant violations of the historical and legal status quo at Muslim and Christian holy sites continue unabated under the protection and encouragement of members of the Israeli government. To be clear, this is in the West Bank, not Gaza. Almost 42,000 Palestinians have been killed since October 7th. So is it any wonder that many are questioning how can this war not be perceived as deliberately targeting the Palestinians? The level of civilian suffering cannot be written off as unavoidable collateral. I grew up a soldier in a region that is all too familiar with conflict. But there is nothing familiar about this war and the violence unleashed since October 7th. In the absence of global accountability, repeated horrors are normalized, threatening to create a future where anything is permitted, anywhere in the world. Is that what we want? Now is the time to ensure the protection of the Palestinian people. It is the moral duty of this international community to establish a protection mechanism for them across the occupied territories. This will guarantee the safety of Palestinians and Israelis from extremists who are taking our region to the brink of an all-out war. That includes those who continue to propagate the idea of Jordan as an alternative homeland. So let me be very, very clear. That will never happen. We will never accept the forced displacement of Palestinians, which is a war crime. No country in the region benefits from escalation. We have seen that clearly in the dangerous developments in Lebanon over the past few days. This has to stop. For years, the Arab world has extended a hand to Israel through the Arab Peace Initiative, offering full recognition and normalization in exchange for peace. But consecutive Israeli governments, emboldened by years of impunity, have rejected peace and chosen confrontation instead. Impunity gathers force. Left unchecked, it gains momentum. Palestinians have borne more than 57 years of occupation and oppression. During this time, the Israeli government has been allowed to cross one red line after another. But now, Israel's decades-long impunity is becoming its own worst enemy, and the consequences are everywhere. The Israeli government has been accused of genocide at the ICJ. Expressions of outrage at its conduct are echoing around the world. Cities everywhere have seen mass protests, and calls for sanctions are growing louder. International frustration with Israel has long been mounting, but it has never been more exposed. For decades, Israel has projected itself as a thriving Western-style democracy in the Middle East. But the brutality of the war on Gaza has forced the world to look closer. Now many see Israel through the eyes of its victims. And the contradiction, the paradox, is too jarring. The modern advanced Israel admired from afar, and the Israel that Palestinians have experienced firsthand, simply cannot coexist. Israel will eventually be entirely one or the other. That is the choice its leaders and its people will have to make. To live by the democratic values of freedom, justice, and equality for all, or to risk further isolation and rejection. Over and over, we have watched Israel try to achieve security through military means. Each escalation is followed by a pause until the next deadlier one. And for years, the global community has taken the path of least resistance, accepting the status quo of the ongoing military occupation of Palestinians, all the while paying lip service to the two-state solution. But it has never been more evident that the current status quo is untenable. And as the International Court of Justice's advisory opinion underscored 2 months ago, it is unequivocally illegal. The court's opinion bears a moral imperative to us all. The obligation it carries is one that our nations cannot afford to ignore for the sake of our world, as well as the future for Palestinians and Israelis alike. Because both peoples deserve to live their lives in dignity, free of violence and fear. And the only way to achieve that is a just peace, one grounded in international law, justice, equal rights, and mutual recognition. That is something we, as nations and people everywhere, can and must unite around. So I call on all countries to join Jordan in enforcing an international Gaza humanitarian gateway, a massive relief effort to deliver food, clean water, medicine, and other vital supplies to those in desperate need. Because humanitarian aid should never be a tool of war. Whatever our politics, one truth is undeniable. No people should have to endure such unprecedented suffering, abandoned and alone. We cannot surrender the future to those who thrive on division and conflict. I urge all nations of conscience to unite with Jordan in the critical weeks ahead on this mission.
I would like to express here our pleasure to see the representative of our friend and brother Palestine in his rightful place among the member states as a result of long struggles. I hope that this historic step will be the final turning point on the road leading to Palestine's membership to the United Nations. The international community and all of us in the human family must fulfill our obligation to the Palestinian people without further ado, that haven't done already. International justice cannot be left in the will of 5 privileged member states of the Security Council. And the most dramatic example to that is the war, the massacre that has been going on in Gaza for the last 350 days. And since October 7, 41,000 Palestinians have been killed in the continuous Israeli attacks. 41,000 lives, 41,000 people, mostly children and women, were ruthlessly taken away. And no one knows where more than 10,000 people are, most of which are children. And likewise, 100,000 people were injured, maimed, or they lost their limbs. 172 journalists were killed while trying to do their job under very difficult circumstances. And more than 500 medics have been killed while they were trying to save lives. Humanitarian aid workers and the United Nations personnel who came to the rescue of the people of Gaza who were struggling with hunger and thirst were killed. More than 215 United Nations personnel. They hit marketplaces, tents, and camps where the refugees were sheltered. They hit 820 mosques and 3 churches that shouldn't have been touched even in war. And they deliberately hit dozens of hospitals, hundreds of schools, more than 130 ambulances carrying patients. They shredded the Charter of the United Nations from the rostrum of the United Nations and shamelessly challenged the whole world, who are people of conscience. From this very rostrum, they challenged them. My friends, leaked images from Israel's prisons, which it has turned into concentration camps, clearly show what kind of barbarianism we are facing. As a result of Israeli attacks, Gaza has become the world's largest cemetery for women and children. More than 17,000 children were targeted by Israeli bullets and bombs. Hind Recep was only 6 years old. He and his family were seeking safety when their car was hit by Israeli forces. He lost everything. He lost his mother, father, siblings, cousins. He lost all the hopes he had packed, and only he survived. He waited desperately for rescue for 12 days. Will you come to take me? I'm fearful. Was waiting for a helping hand to reach out to him for 12 days. Despite the level of our world has reached, despite the technology at our disposal, despite our organizations with huge budgets employing tens of thousands of personnel, as a human family of 8 billion inhabitants, we haven't yet managed to rescue a 6-year-old girl, which is actually like an injured sparrow trapped under the rubble that was shaking before our eyes. Hundreds of Gazan children died and are still dying because they cannot find a morsel of a dry bread, a sip of water, and a bowl of soup. In Gaza, not only children are dying, but also the United Nations system. The values that the West claims to defend are dying. The truth is dying. The hopes of humanity to live in a more just world are dying one by one. I would like to call out to the countries supporting Israel in an unconditional manner. How long are you going to be able to carry the shame of witnessing this massacre? Dear friends, while children are dying in Gaza, in Ramallah, in Lebanon, while babies are dying in incubators, unfortunately, the international community has given a very bad test and failed in a big way. What's happening in Palestine, look, is a sign of a great moral collapse. I believe that the peoples of the world, the leaders of countries and international organizations should reflect on this painful picture, upon this painful landscape. And I would like to state very clearly and loudly here, the Israeli government, disregarding basic human rights, trampling on international law at every opportunity, is practicing ethnic cleansing, a clear genocide against a nation, a people, and occupying their lands step by step. Palestinians whose freedom, independence, and most basic rights have been usurped are rightfully exercising their legitimate rights of resistance against this occupation and ethnic cleansing. The just resistance of the Palestinian people against the occupiers of their land is too noble. It's honorable and legitimate to be called illegitimate. It's heroic and it's noble. The only reason for Israel's aggression against the Palestinian people is the unconditional support of a group of countries. And I would like to wave at my brothers and sisters at the legitimate resistance in Palestine. As I've said before, the support of a group of countries for Israel is the reason why this aggression is still going on. Countries that have a say over Israel are openly complicit in this massacre, with a policy of run for the hare and catch the hound. Those who are supposedly working for a ceasefire in front of the stage continue to send arms and ammunition to Israel so that it can continue its massacres in the background. There's a paper that has been going around back and forth since May. Hamas has repeatedly declared its acceptance of the ceasefire offer. But the Israeli government has made it very clear that this is the party that doesn't want peace by constantly dragging its feet, making a settlement of the dispute much more difficult, almost impossible, constantly finding an excuse and sneakily killing its negotiating partner at a time when it was closest to a ceasefire. Israel's stalling and deception should not be given any more credit. 70 years ago, just as Hitler was stopped by an alliance of humanity, Netanyahu and his murder network must be stopped by an alliance of humanity. We support the case brought by the Republic of South Africa at the International Court of Justice to ensure that Israel's crimes do not go unpunished. We will take every step necessary for justice to be served in the case for which we have applied as an intervener or as a party. We will fight for the blood of Ayşenur Ezgi Eygi, who was shot in the head and murdered by Israeli soldiers during a peaceful protest in Nablus. And we will fight in all legal remedies, and we will keep on doing that. While a ceasefire in Gaza is urgently needed, the underlying problem in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories. Based on the 1967 borders, an independent, sovereign, and geographically integrated Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital must come into being. This cannot be delayed any longer. I would like it to be known that we are closely following Israel's increasing attacks on our first Qibla, Al-Aqsa Mosque and Haram al-Sharif. I would like to state once again on this podium as Tayyip Erdoğan once again that I'm not using a language of politics. I am encouraged by our ancestors who have always stood by the side of the victims honorably and nobly. We are a nation that has been on the side of the oppressed and against the oppressors and oppression throughout history. We are such a nation. We welcomed Jews fleeing the Inquisition 500 years ago and Jews fleeing Hitler's concentration camps. We opened our arms wide. We, as a country and a nation, I'll be very clear to say that we have no animosity or hostility towards the people of Israel. We oppose anti-Semitism in the same way we oppose the targeting of Muslims just because of their faith. Our problem is with the massacre policies of the Israeli government. Our problem is with the oppressor and the oppression, just as it was 5 centuries ago. Everybody should know about this. We will always speak of the truth and speak of what's right and what's fair. Even if some people will be uncomfortable, we will continue to shout out the truth and stand by the righteous and boldly say that we will speak of what we know is right, even though it will hurt some people. We are strengthening our common action plan with another neighbor of ours, Iran, in the region in order to establish stability and peace. It's going to contribute tremendously to our efforts. The war in Ukraine has been going on for 3 years, and we are still away from establishing a permanent peace and stability. As the arms race accelerates, the space for diplomacy is shrinking. It's very important that diplomacy and dialogue will ensure territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine, and our support for those endeavors of Turkey will continue even strongly.